The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under soft lighting as I refilled water glasses and arranged notepads with practiced efficiency. Another quarterly board meeting at Maxwell Industries, where I played the role of executive secretary for the past 18 months. If only they knew. Coffee, black, 2 sugars. James Maxwell barked without looking up from his phone. At 45, he ran his father's company the same way he probably ordered around his household staff, with casual arrogance and zero awareness. Right away, Mr. Maxwell, I replied, keeping my voice professionally neutral. My name is Victoria Chen, though they all called me Miss Walker, the name I'd used to get this position. To them, I was just another secretary, invisible except when they needed something. They had no idea I owned 51% of their company. The other board members filed in, all expensive suits and self-importance. I knew each of their names, backgrounds, and dirty little secrets. I'd spent 2 years studying them before implementing my plan. Everyone settled? I asked, setting down James's coffee. The quarterly reports are at your places. Bradley Thompson, head of finance, barely glanced at me. We'll need the usual confidentiality agreements before we begin. Already done, sir. I'd signed more NDAs than I could count, none under my real name. The irony was delicious. I took my usual seat in the corner, laptop ready to take minutes. This particular board meeting would be one to remember, but not for the reasons they expected. First quarter results are disappointing, James began, frowning at the spreadsheets. Revenues down 12% from projections. The Asian market's softer than expected, Bradley offered, and the new product line isn't performing. I bit my tongue, but not hard enough. Perhaps if we considered the cultural preferences study for marketing. The silence was immediate and crushing. Secretaries didn't offer opinions at board meetings. That wasn't our place. I'm sorry, James's voice dripped condescension. Did the secretary just try to give business advice? Charles Wilson, the oldest board member, chuckled. Careful there, Miss Walker. Don't strain yourself thinking about things beyond your expertise. Heat crept up my neck, but not from embarrassment, from anger. The same anger that had driven me to spend 5 years building my own technology company, then using its profits to quietly buy up Maxwell Industries stock through a maze of shell corporations. The same anger that had led me to take this job to watch from the inside as they ran my investment into the ground. My apologies, I murmured, returning to my notes. Let them laugh. Tomorrow everything would change. The meeting dragged on, a parade of missed opportunities and poor decisions. They dismissed marketing's warnings about the product line, ignored R&D's suggestions for innovation, brushed aside HR's concerns about talent retention. I documented every mistake, every dismissal, every example of their arrogance, not in the official minutes, but in my private notes. Evidence I'd use later. One last item, James announced. The Sherman contract. My fingers paused over the keyboard. The Sherman contract, a $100 million deal that would either save or sink the company, depending on how it was handled. Tom's team has the proposal ready, Bradley said. Standard terms, aggressive pricing. We'll undercut the competition and lock them in for 5 years. I couldn't stay quiet. Not about this, sir, if I may. James slammed his hand on the table. Enough. What could you possibly know about the Sherman contract? Only that Sherman Industries specifically requested sustainability commitments in their RFP, I said quietly, and that their CEO has publicly stated they won't sign long-term contracts without environmental compliance guarantees. And how exactly would you know that? Bradley sneered. It was in their press release last month, and in the private conversations I've had with their board. But they didn't need to know that part. Press release or not, James cut in, you're not paid to analyze contracts. You're paid to take notes and get coffee, so please stick to what you're qualified for. The other board members nodded in agreement. In their minds, I was just an uppity secretary who needed to be put in her place. If they'd bothered to really look into Miss Walker, they might have discovered that I held degrees from MIT and Stanford, that I'd built and sold 2 tech companies before I turned 30, that I'd been featured in Forbes 40 Under 40. But they'd never looked, never questioned. A young Asian woman applying for a secretarial position didn't trigger any alarms. Their mistake. Of course, sir, I said, returning to my notes. My apologies for overstepping. The meeting ended with a series of self-congratulatory remarks about their brilliant strategy. As they filed out, James paused by my desk. "Miss Walker," he said, his tone patronizing, "I know you're trying to be helpful, but please remember your place. We can easily find another secretary who understands professional boundaries." I smiled, thinking of the registered letter being delivered to the company's legal department at that very moment. "Yes, Mr. Maxwell. I understand completely." After they left, I sat alone in the boardroom, looking at the empty chairs where tomorrow's drama would unfold. The letter would be on James's desk by morning. Official notification that Victoria Chen, majority shareholder of Maxwell Industries, was calling an emergency board meeting. They'd spend tonight scrambling to figure out who Victoria Chen was, how she'd acquired controlling interest in their company, and what she wanted. They wouldn't find much. I'd been very careful about keeping my real identity private. They'd have to wait until tomorrow to meet the actual owner of Maxwell Industries. I gathered my things, straightened the chairs, and turned off the lights. One last day of playing secretary. One last day of being underestimated and dismissed. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Documents delivered. Everything's ready for tomorrow. Perfect. I took one last look at the boardroom where I'd endured 18 months of condescension and discrimination. Tomorrow, these same chairs would host a very different kind of meeting. Tomorrow they'd learn that the secretary they dismissed owned 51% of their company. Tomorrow they'd understand exactly how badly they'd underestimated me. But tonight, I had one more pot of coffee to make, one more set of notes to file, one more day of invisible work to complete. After all, a good secretary always finishes her tasks before moving on to bigger things. I arrived early the next morning, dressed not in my usual conservative secretary attire, but in a perfectly tailored Armani suit. The security guard did a double take but said nothing as I swiped my badge. The office was already buzzing with tension. Legal teams huddled in corners, whispering urgently. Board members rushed between offices, their faces tight with concern. Nobody noticed that their secretary was dressed differently. Nobody noticed me at all. Right on schedule, James burst out of his office, waving a document. "Find out everything you can about Victoria Chen," he shouted at his assistant. "I want to know who she is, where she came from, and how the hell she got control of my company." I smiled, organizing papers for the emergency board meeting. They'd spent all night searching, finding only what I wanted them to find: a successful tech entrepreneur who quietly amassed Maxwell Industries stock through various investment vehicles over the past 3 years. What they hadn't found was the connection between Victoria Chen and their unassuming secretary, Miss Walker. At 9 a.m. sharp, the board members filed into the conference room. Their usual swagger was gone, replaced by barely concealed panic. "Coffee, Mr. Maxwell?" I asked sweetly. He waved me away, absorbed in his phone. "Not now. We're waiting for someone important." "Yes," I said, checking my watch. "You are." The room fell silent as I walked not to my usual corner, but to the head of the table. I placed my laptop down and opened it, displaying the presentation I'd prepared. "What are you doing?" Bradley demanded. "This is a private meeting." I smiled, removing my glasses, the plain ones I'd worn as part of my disguise. "I know. I called it." James stood up, his face reddening. "Miss Walker, you need to leave. Now, this meeting is for—" "My name," I cut him off, "is Victoria Chen, and I own 51% of Maxwell Industries." The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear their brains short-circuiting as they tried to process this information. That's impossible," Charles Wilson sputtered. "Victoria Chen is standing right in front of you," I finished. "For the past 18 months, I've watched you run my investment into the ground. I've documented every mistake, every missed opportunity, every instance of mismanagement." I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Their faces drained of color as they saw their own words quoted back at them, alongside graphs showing the company's declining performance. "The Sherman contract?" I continued. "They're not signing it. I met with their CEO last week. They're going with our competitor, the one that actually read their sustainability requirements." James found his voice. "This is some kind of trick. You're just a secretary." "No, James, I'm the majority shareholder who's been watching you destroy this company's value through sheer arrogance." I turned to my laptop and pressed enter, and I'm not done. The screens around the room came to life, displaying live video feeds of offices around the world. In each one, security teams were escorting executives from their offices. "What is this?" Bradley's voice shook. "A corporate restructuring," I replied calmly. "As of 9 a.m., the entire senior management team is being replaced. Their termination papers are being delivered now. Your copies are in front of you." They stared at the manila envelopes I'd placed at their seats earlier, when they still thought I was just the secretary bringing them their morning papers. "You can't do this," James whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I can, and I am. Check with legal if you'd like. Everything is perfectly legitimate." I smiled. I made sure all the paperwork was filed correctly. After all, that's what a good secretary does, right? Charles Wilson opened his envelope with trembling hands. "The severance terms are generous," I finished. "More generous than you deserve, given your performance. Sign now, and you can leave with dignity. Make a scene, and I release the documentation of your various indiscretions to the press." One by one, they signed. One by one, they stood on shaky legs and walked out of the room they'd dominated for so long. James was the last to sign. He paused at the door, turning back to me. "How?" he asked. "How did you hide in plain sight for so long?" "You made it easy," I replied. "You were so convinced of your own superiority that you never really looked at me. Never wondered why a secretary took such detailed notes about market trends. Never questioned why she understood complex contracts and financial statements. Because you were just the help," he said quietly, finally understanding. "Exactly. Your prejudice was my perfect disguise." I stood up, straightening papers out of habit. "Goodbye, James. Try not to underestimate the next secretary you work for, assuming anyone hires you after this." After the boardroom emptied, my phone buzzed with messages. The restructuring was proceeding smoothly worldwide. Stock prices were already rising as news of the management changes spread. My new executive team, handpicked over the past year, would arrive tomorrow. But today, I had one last thing to do. I walked to the office kitchen where I'd made countless cups of coffee. Sandra, one of the janitors, was there emptying trash bins. "Miss Walker," she smiled. "I mean, I guess I should call you Ms. Chen now." "Victoria is fine," I said, pulling an envelope from my bag. "I have something for you." Inside was a promotion letter. Head of Facilities Management, reporting directly to me. "But I'm just a janitor," she stammered. "No," I corrected her. "You're someone who knows this building and its people better than anyone. Someone who works hard without recognition. Someone who deserves a chance to prove herself." Tears filled her eyes as she read the letter. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Just promise me one thing," I said, heading for the door. "When you're hiring your own team, don't ever use the word just. There's no such thing as just a janitor or just a secretary. Today proved that." I spent the rest of the day in my new office, James' old one, beginning the work of rebuilding Maxwell Industries. The view was different from up here, but I found myself missing my old desk's vantage point. You see things differently from the bottom. Important things that people at the top often miss. That evening, as I was leaving, I passed my old desk. A young woman was sitting there, one of the temporary staff hired to help with the transition. "Excuse me," she said timidly. "I'm not sure how to work this coffee maker." I smiled, remembering my first day here. "Let me show you. I've had some practice." Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one at the head of the table. Sometimes she's the quiet one in a corner, taking notes, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal that she's been in charge all along. The next morning's Wall Street Journal headline read, "Maxwell Industries Shocker. Secretary revealed as majority owner ousts entire board." But the real shock wasn't that I'd bought the company. It was that I'd shown them exactly who I was, day after day, and they'd been too blind to see it. Their prejudice had been my greatest weapon, their arrogance my perfect cover, and now their company was mine.